Welcome to What Not to Do. I'm Kyle Schmitz, and this is episode 41. It's part 2 with Ron Jung, and we dive into the glory of getting started. Chesterton said, if anything is worth doing, if something's worth doing at all, it's worth doing poorly. So, what are you waiting for? Get started, hold tight, we'll be right back. One of my biggest aims in life is to give you more in use value than I take in cash value. And I'm so thankful for all the thoughts and ideas you've shared with me on how I can better do that. One of those ideas that has come up on a few different occasions has been, we love the long form conversational format, but sometimes it takes a while just to get through even one episode. What would it look like to aim for episodes that are 1 hour or less in length without compromising the format? And I thought, great idea. I love the long conversational format too, and I really want those conversations to be as accessible and easy to digest as possible. So I'm absolutely pumped to introduce a new innovation of what not to do. We'll keep the long form conversational format that has been so well received, and we'll divide it into 30 to 45 minute segments that'll make it more easy to digest on your morning commute or working out at the gym or run or hanging out at the house. This is going to be awesome. I'm so pumped to keep giving you such high value conversations, and now more accessible and easier to digest than ever. I'm so proud to be your guys' host and so thankful for all your help innovating and iterating to make this community even better. I love you guys. And with that, let's get to what not to do.
We're not about, I think what people might hear me talking, because I don't, I know your audience is broad, right? So,
yeah, for sure.
So, you hear that, they want to jam their stuff down our throats. No, that's not true. What we want to do is we want to create something, and that when you see, it's appealing, it's beautiful, and it's an alternative to the death and the shallowness and the loneliness and the of our world.
Yeah.
Even the most successful in our world experience those things, and this is the alternative. So that's part of that idea of a Christian. It has that orientation.
Yeah, because if you're training leaders in the world, it's like you said, to what end? And that you want them to be, and you said godly leaders, and so it's consistent with the Christian framework. Obviously, for folks that are listening, they may or not be Christians, they may or may not have that framework, but they can probably understand that they can see the benefit and the virtue of being consistent with that.
Yes.
And Jake told a story about you in this podcast, and what really kind of helped to cement things for him as far as, okay, you've got classical education, and then you've got classical Christian education. What's the big deal? Mm-hmm. And I'll let you say it, but something about he was tying together how our way of studying, our way of understanding things in the world, and tying that together with the Christian worldview.
Yeah.
So how do those two things go together?
Well, if the assumption is that God created it all, and He's got a plan and a purpose, if we're teaching things that don't have that in mind, or that acknowledgement, or that trajectory, then what we're teaching is a lie.
Yep.
So it's I'm going to try to relight my cigar as I'm talking. So I had this conversation where I was pastoring, and it was an administrator at a public high school. You probably even know the guy. But he wants to ask me about our decision. This is back when we were homeschooling our kids, why we were homeschooling. And I said part of it was this concern for truth, right? So I said, what is truth, right? So I said, one of the foundational, and so this is a Christian guy who's in administration. I said, so one of the foundational truths is that God created this world. He created it all. Can you teach that in your school? No. He said no. As another foundation is that Jesus is Lord, right? Every knee is going to bow, every tongue confess that He's Lord. You teach that that He's Lord. I said, no. I said, then nothing else matters. I mean, it makes it irrelevant, right? Those are the foundational truths by which everything comes from. And if we don't, then it's just people are lost. Then it's just opinion, and the only thing left, if there's no truth, and if it's just a mere opinion by everyone, the only thing that can hold us as a civilization together is power, right? It's only power. If only when we understand that there's truth can we correct it, and that anyone can stand up and say, this is wrong, thus saith the Lord, and then, but without that, then everything doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is power. Which, by the way, you can just look at our politics today and see that that's where we're already at.
Well, and for sure, folks that are listening, entrepreneurs, public figures, leaders, they've had success, they've been in the trenches, they're aspiring to more, they're building things, and I wouldn't know one that would say, I haven't, dealing with people, I haven't been stabbed in the back, or I haven't, someone's ran a power play on me, or whatever it might be, we've all probably experienced that to some extent or another. I remember the first time I experienced that in the corporate world. It was miserable. It's like, oh, this is what they did. It's like, come on, like, who not everyone, has the same set of standards. Yeah. So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying, like in the Christian framework, because God created everything, which is the belief, right? Yeah. Then logically, we can only know things in their fullest or truest sense in light of that knowledge.
Correct.
How does it relate back to the God of the Bible? And that's not to say, like, I don't think Einstein was a Christian. It doesn't mean that he can't know some true things about, quantum theory or whatever it might be,
Correct.
You can't know true things about the world, but to the end of knowing it in its fullest or truest sense and how it reflects God's purposes in the world, there'd be always that missing piece, that falling short. And so that's crucial in developing a godly leader, for them to make those connections. So when they go and they become an accountant, or they go and they become a janitor, or they go and become operate a CNC machine, or they go and they lead a company, Fortune 500, the way in which they can operate through the world, they're 110% consistent. Rather, they believe the world to be created, how it works from that framework, and then how best to guide the company, or how best to make those decisions over against. And we all do this. So you could be an atheist, you could be Muslim, and we're all working from some kind of idea or belief about how the world works, and we make decisions accordingly.
Yep.
And so I think that's really important, because it's as a Christian, we should want our kids then to make those same connections, and they wouldn't be getting that. You're saying in the public school necessarily, it's going to stop short. But this is interesting, because we were talking off air about a podcast that you were thinking about starting.
Yes.
Which is really cool. You want to talk a little about your vision for that?
Sure. It's called it'll be called a Quarter Three Strands, and the idea is to talk through topics of education, church, and family or home, and those three things that would mutually support one another and things. And I just, from my observation, not only as headmaster, but also as an elder in our church, and years of the pastoring and such, just seeing
a dad,
just seeing the need for help in understanding these things and becoming better. If our families were stronger, then our churches and schools would be stronger. If our churches were stronger, our families and schools would be stronger, etc. So it's this quarter three strands that comes from the Proverbs about the quarter three strands is not easily broken, and so I'm hoping to get that off the ground fairly soon, to start talking through some of these things.
Yeah, so maybe the takeaway is, if you've been hearing this, and let's just say you come from a Christian background or belief, and you're really kind of intrigued about what Ron has been talking about, look forward to and trying to figure out, so how does that even look, and just thinking through, Because your podcast is basically saying it's not just about a school, it's not just about a church, it's not just about the home. It's really all three working together synergistically. And so if you're intrigued, if you have more questions, Ron's contact, we'll have it in the show notes so you guys can reach out.
Excellent.
But look forward to the podcast because that could be a next step as far as just trying to understand in a deeper sense how this actually plays out on a day-to-day level.
You know, and if you're not a Christian too and you're interested, I'd be happy to talk to you too.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Why? Why do I do what I do? Let me tell you. My why is to use my presence and my prose to inspire you to go all in on you so that you live a legacy worth leaving. All right, so you kind of already touched on, why you do what you do. And really, I mean, the podcast is a cool thing because it's you kind of actually drawing out why you do what you do.
Yeah, to a broader audience, right?
Yeah, raising godly leaders, not just in a school, but in family and church and school, and for the sake of society, which is cool.
Correct.
Very, very cool. Okay, so, but one thing I love about your background is, I mean, you've been, such a breadth of a background, the chance to work with people, to counsel them, to shepherd them, pastor them, lead younger people, right?
Right.
Very cool. So you've had some great successes, and so I'm curious, just looking back at the course of your life, what are some things you look back at and you say, like, you know what, this was a really good decision I made? The podcast is about failures.
Yeah.
But it's not about, that failure is not, when you talk about ends and means, failure is not the end, right?
Yeah.
That's not the thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good thing in our day and age to actually think back through and say, this was a really good decision. Yeah. And if you were going to counsel somebody, you'd want to tell them, what went right for you,
Right.
In that sense. And so I think there are some things that you for sure have. But what comes to mind when you look back at the course of your life and career of a few decisions that you made, right?
Particular things, I think. One is marrying my wife, Wendy.
There you go.
I know
she's listening right now.
Yeah. So, that was big. I tell my kids and I tell the students at Providence Academy, guard your heart above all things, right? Don't give your heart away to another person. Be very, hold off until you really know. And I had the thing I loved about my wife as I met her, as we were kind of doing this. I perceived she was incredibly smart, and she appeared not to need me. that was so attractive to me that she didn't need me. She was she could do about whatever she wanted. She was a National Merit Scholar who graduated college in 3 years with 1 B+ and the rest A's. If you know my wife, she's just really wonderful in terms of advice about running things, organizing things, just great. And I remember having a conversation. We were just friends. We weren't even dating. We were just friends. And I just asked her about what she was planning on doing. And she said, well, everyone's telling me I should be a lawyer. And she went to school, I think political science kind of thing. And I think history of the political science concentration or something like that towards law school. And she says, really, but what I would like to do is be a wife and a mother. And I almost asked her to marry me right now. And to me, it wasn't just that she wanted to be a wife and a mother. It's just that she knew what she wanted.
Yeah.
And it went against the grain of others, and she didn't care that it went against the grain, and that was very attractive to me. So if you know me, I'm a big idea guy. I'm a vision guy. I like starting things. I like getting things moving. I'm not good at the minutia. I'm not good at the keeping track of things. I'm not good at, this is part of my failures is, trying to do things all on my own. It never works, right? Because I will always leave something behind. My wife is the opposite of me in that. She's very good at keeping track of things and going, helping, and it just, we make a great team, I guess you say. So that's I tell you, that's probably my biggest success is I found someone willing to marry me like her before she was old enough to know better. we were, just no. She's awesome, and yeah, just she's fantastic. So that's I think one of the big decisions that was great. I think the other was I mentioned to you I grew up poor, got bused up to Napa, and money became a very almost an idol for me. And part of it was at a risk of sounding offensive, but remember I grew up poor, and I grew up around poor people, and I was always disappointed with the poverty mentality. Right? I couldn't. I liked them. I had lots of friends, but it was there was always that a lack of being able to see anything beyond just the day-to-day or the just the there wasn't ambition, there wasn't something greater. When I got up to Napa, I was like, oh, these are my people. And so in 7th grade I got a job because my parents would tell me, okay, here's our budget, we have enough so you can get 2 shirts with a tiger on it, Le Tigre, Mervin's brand. If you want a flag, Britannica, or an alligator, that was Izod.
You're dating yourself.
You have to, I know. This is 70s, right? This is the late 70s. You have to pay for yourself, and so I got a job so I can have an alligator on my chest and hang out with the people that I liked, and so this, and then in high school, I got friends that you go to their house and it's just like wow, and I grew up. My house was. The house I grew up in, which in my memory was big and everything, was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house that was 880 square feet with no basement, right? And the lot was tiny. And there was 5 of us. I had 3 brothers. We never had my own room. It was but it was what I was used to. I grew up. I had no complaints. My parents were great. My dad was a great provider. At times when the church couldn't afford to pay, much, he'd just go out and get jobs and bring home the bacon, never complain, never just did things. Great example to me. But I was in the mood, like I want to be wealthy, so I get to college. I also wanted to go to space, right? So currently Elon Musk is like one of my favorite guys to look at, but I wanted to go to space. It was pretty early on that I realized I was a lot bigger than all the astronauts. So in 8th grade, starting in 8th grade, I wanted to be an aerospace engineer. But in college, I think God worked on me, and I realized what was more important was asking that question, what is it that God would want me to do? And being okay with, well, what if he sends me, as a missionary to, someplace, and getting to that point where I was like, okay, God, I'll do whatever it is that you want me to do. And what happened is I was reading Kierkegaard, and, as I would be apt to do. And there was a place where he talked about what good does it do you to make a loud bang in the now if it had no echo in eternity. And that struck me, and what I realized is that what was more important to me was that I was doing meaningful work rather than working for money. And as soon as I allowed myself to do that, I was able to hear, in a sense, God calling me into something else, which was ministry and working with people. As Pastor Dan Jackson says, we have the gift of voluntary poverty. And it's not that we're poor, we're not. We make good money. It's just not what I probably could be making if I was in some other kind of thing. And but to me, it was probably the best thing that happened to me was making that decision. I'm just going to do what I think God is leading me to do. And so that was, getting involved with Young Life and to youth ministry, and then at the church. And I've always had a love for the church because, believe it or not, my whole upbringing in the church was just so positive, even at the church that I was here pastored for 12 years, I can honestly say I probably was there a little too long. It didn't end all that great, but I was upset with some things that happened in that, but it was never towards God or His church. And so that was probably one of the things. And I've always had this. What do you want to say? That a lot of things that motivate me this is going to sound really weird, but duty, right? So here's something that ought to be done. Someone ought to do it. Well, why isn't it me? Right? So I have a history of starting things because it ought to be done, right? So, hey, we ought to have a Young Life Club at this high school, so we'll just go ahead and start it. We ought to, right? So even when we started homeschooling our son, Nathan, our oldest, it was like, well, it would be really great if our son can compete in good athletics. Okay, yeah, someone ought to do something about it. So Wendy and I gathered a group of people, and we started NUCHA, an athletic association for homeschool kids. And I served as the first president, very short term, and then Dan Miller for a long term. Then Wendy was for another long term, and we're always still very close to that. But
it's still alive and kicking today, which is awesome.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. So this whole idea of what ought to be done and just do it. And so I never regret. Those are great decisions of like, hey, this ought to be done. Let's do it.
And you can attribute it in a sense to, well, you mentioned earlier just dreaming big, and then how moving from like an impoverished community to a more wealthy community. It's like, hey, like there's other people that actually think big, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Oh, it's a great thing.
It's kind of like sometimes we live our lives just crawling around on the floor, thinking, like this is all there is, and if we conserve, we have a very defensive mindset, but we can't really fall any further on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we got to stand up and realize, hey, there's a cosmos to be conquered. So I love that. I think that kind of thing is great, and even that idea of like the duty thing, initiative, right? Until you see something that needs to be done and do it, and it doesn't mean that you're the guy to take the ball the whole 9 yards, but you can hand it off, right? But it means someone's got to call it, right? Someone's got to get started. Yeah, okay, that's awesome. How do I do what I do? Well, for me, there's one overarching ultimate principle: to give you more in use value than I take in cash value. It'd be like if I wrote a book and you bought that book for $10, but that book gave you a $1 million idea. I have effectively given you more in use value than I've taken from you in cash value. And that's exactly what I aim to do with what not to do. So let's flip it. We can do multiple episodes.
I know. There's so much wrong.
That's the cool thing here. So, but yeah, I mean, as you're looking over the course of your life and career, what are 1, 2, 3 things that come to the top of your mind? It's like, man, if I could just have that one back,
Sure.
Maybe a way that you would counsel, younger on, or even your own boys or daughters, not boys or sons, but.
So I think there's one of the things that it's funny because my wife loves to tell this story, and that is the first time she met my mom. She was with my mom met my wife and her roommate, and my mom couldn't remember which one I liked. And he sat down, and she wanted to tell all these girls all about me because she was excited that one of these is someone I liked. And my wife loves to tell this story. The first thing that came out of her mouth was, Ronnie was always such a loyal boy. And from the very beginning, I guess, of my life, my mom had seen it in my life, and I've seen it, and that is, I'm a very loyal person. To whether it's the team I root for, whether it's to a person a friend, and so one of the things that I've noticed is that I have a hard time letting go when I ought to. And just to give an example of how I'm learning that, like recently, there's a former NFL player that I've had some odds with. I'm not going to go into that too much. But he's a dear friend of mine for about a decade, and it was really hard to part ways. So I basically talked to some people, the session at church, the elders at church, through it, and some other people at Providence, and it was like, here's what I'm thinking, and at some point I know if things aren't, turned around, I'm going to have to no longer be friends. And I don't think I think my younger self would have just kept that burden on myself. My older self knows me better, that that type of loyalty can get me into trouble. And so to be able to bring other people around and say, hey, you're going to have to help me make a decision. Unfortunately, the decision was pretty obvious when it happened. But before that even happened, I was bringing other people who I knew and I respected, and into it. But it has, those loyalties have sticking with people too far to where it's affected me personally, whether it's my time, my emotional energy or strength, or even money, has gotten me into some trouble. And being able to, in other words, know myself enough to have others to kind of ground me. To be able to, this is going to sound really weird, to be able to entrust myself to other men who I can hear their advice and submit to it, is phenomenal. And if you and to the audience, I would say, and to my sons, I would say, if you don't have people like that in your life, you need to find them.
Yeah, because they can see things you can't.
Yes.
That's interesting. I've never thought about that before. Loyalty, in the sense of having being a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
But because we generally think of loyalty as a really good thing, but there's a time when the ship is sinking and we don't want to get off.
Yeah.
And that's hard, and there are a lot of emotions that run through that.
Yep.
We don't see or think things clearly, and like you said, having those wise counselors, people that you can go to, that are willing to be kind of, like you said before, edgy. They're willing to disagree with you, and then ultimately, folks that you can say, you know what, you're right. I'm wrong. I got to be done with this.
And I don't remember if it was in a sermon that I heard or someone else speaking, but they said that often our greatest strength is also what ends up being our greatest weakness. And that was one of those elbow nudges I think I got from my wife, and she was right. And so that was one. Another is because we can go all on day on my what not to do's. The other is I sometimes would know this ought to be done, right? This ought to be done, and of course my response is, well, then I should just do it. And there's this double-edged thing of like, do I got to count the costs, right? I have to count the costs, but at the same time, what often happens is I put on all these other costs on me and don't trust that I should just do it, right? G.K. Chesterton said, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing poorly, right? And sometimes that idea, well, if I do this, then it's not going to work out well, or it's going to be done poorly, that might prevent me. But then I know I ought to do it. Yeah. Like I know I ought to do it, and then the idea is I eventually I just have to come and go, let's do it. and just kind of not without wisdom or anything, but just not going in there blindly or without counsel, but boy, if I'm going to wait until I know for sure this is going to turn out perfectly, then nothing's going to get done.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's this idea of how many times I have waited too long, even though I knew I should do it, because of, and it's fear. I think that seems to be a theme in your show, is not doing something out of fear.
Yeah.
But part of that idea of okay, I can't. If you're starting something, and if your audience are entrepreneurs, they know when you start something, it's messy.
Yep.
And that shouldn't prevent us from doing it.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the advices I have for my sons is, that a lot of times you hear the stories, it's been edited so that it sounds like, and then finally they did this thing and they lived happily ever after. And really what it is that, and then they did stuff, and now the hard work happens, and now the troubles come, and now it's difficult, and now it's right. And I think there have been times in my life where I've made the decision not to, or too late, because I was afraid, or I didn't feel like I know that this is this is going to be tough, right? And Kyle and I were here earlier talking about, right, I'm 52, thinking in my head, okay, I got about 20 years, right? I got 20 years to work full time.
A lifetime.
I got a lifetime to work. But just thinking about, like at 52, I can't work as hard as I did when I was in my 30s. Yeah. I can feel I got to work smarter.
Yep.
But I can't imagine not working, and I like to put everything into it. And so one of the things that I've been struggling with is, okay, I don't want to just coast the next 20 years, right? Why am I holding back because I'm afraid that at my age I'm going to be undone, and that, right? Can't God just prosper me in this particular thing for the next 20 years and just keep going? But it doesn't always work that way. You have to do something different. And again, I feel like I'm at that stage where I got to say, all right, I just got to go. So I think that's the thing. And then the third thing I think, which is probably something your audience will be very interesting, is I have a trail of starting things that that's what I do. But how many of them weren't sustained? And part of it is because I wasn't thinking with that end in mind. Like, I'm starting this, but eventually I'm going to not be here or do this. And how much of my effort wasn't to build up the organization or other leaders to the point where I would be comfortable being able to leave it, right? So then I look back and I go, within 5 years of me leaving Southern California, only one of the 5 clubs that were going on down there were still going. Or my church that I tried to talk to them about, okay, you're going to have to replace me when I leave. Don't go cheap, right? Don't go cheap. Right, I've been ministering in the same area for 9.5 years. I've been doing this full time, even though you're only paying me half time because I have this partnership with Young Life. You have to have a full time guy here to sustain it. And then I left, and they went cheap, and they had a part time guy who was going to seminary, and I think we had probably about 100 and. What did we count? It was something close to 100 kids a week were coming through our doors at the church, and within 2 years it was like 15 because they went cheap, And I look back at it and I go, I didn't do enough to make sure it was going to sustain after I leave, and that's depressing when you're 52 and you're looking back and going. All right. Now I know nothing's going to last forever, but
It goes back to that Kierkegaard quote. Like when you're talking about, because you're talking about life from a macro perspective, don't make your life just about a bang with no echo in eternity.
Yeah.
But there's also, we can apply that on a micro level within our career, right, or working for a company or whatever it is that we're doing. Don't be so focused just on your bang. How are things going to? What's that echo when you leave? And are you setting it up for success that succession to keep going?
Right.
Or is it going to fail without you? So it's interesting how it seems like that principle would come back to play.
You know the why, and you know the how. So what? What is it that we're going after? Well, our big, hairy, audacious goal is to inspire 1 billion people to live a legacy worth leaving by 2030. That's 100 million people per year for the next 10 years. And my friend, it starts with you. This podcast is for you, it's about you, and I couldn't do it without you.
So I'll tell you, one of the things I've really, really liked about being at Providence is, we've gone through a cycle of, when I first got there, we had a small school and a group of board members who were very much hands-on, micro-managing type of thing. And so we clashed a lot because if we're only talking about the here and now and not about the future, then one of my refrains is we're 6 months behind. The conversations we should be having, that we're having now, are things that we should have been doing 6 months ago. What we should be talking about now is next year, and just having this. And so the board, realizing that we have to do something different, looked for a different way, and we went to a board governance policy. I can't remember the guy that's associated primarily with board governance, but it's been great, So the board, has the ends and they give me the freedom to do the means, and so and that helped us grow the school, to get the high school added to the school. But now it's like we know, we're in growing pains again. Like we're too big for our facilities. We need to we need to build. We want to have multiple campuses, grammar schools feeding in. There's all this stuff, and now the board has really been like, right? So they had a retreat to talk through the vision stuff that we'd worked together on, that I've kind of helped guide, right? But they said I don't even need to be there, right? And it's like, and part of me is like, because part of my problem is it's only going to be done if I'm doing it, right? It's only going to be good if I do it, right? And being able to set back and have a board who's proactive now, and they're doing it, and they come back and say, okay, here's what we talked about. What do you think? And here's what you need to do. And it's like, the angels sing, and because of that, then it gives me confidence. Okay, if I get hit by a bus, I think we're going to do good.
Yeah.
Whereas if you would ask me that a few years ago, I might not have said the same thing.
So actually, it goes back to that Chesterton quote about if something is worth doing, it's worth doing it perfectly.
Poorly.
Or worth doing poorly.
Yeah.
And the way that you initially used that was just get started. Don't wait too long, right?
Yeah.
The other part of that is don't wait too long to delegate tasks, right? And even if the person might not do it as well as you can, the importance of delegation, that it's just so that it does get done, and it's worth doing poorly, and it's kind of what you're describing. The importance of, especially as something grows and expands, you can't shoulder the world.
Right.
None of us are Atlas.
Right.
And the importance of understanding it and trusting and saying, maybe I'm not as great as what I thought I was, and do it all. And
Well, and also and part of it's just age, right? Now,
sure.
10 years ago, 20 years ago, I'm not thinking about legacy. I'm not thinking about retiring, or I got 20 years left. I mean, these are weird. It's weird, like all of a sudden thinking, that's not that long, I mean, when I was 35 or something, 70 sounded like an eternity away. Right. Now I'm 52, and it just seems like that's going to happen like that.
A couple birthdays in there.
Yeah. So I understand there's probably a focus, but if I would have had someone, an older, wiser person coming to me and start thinking, okay, hey, I know you're planning on going off to seminary, and what are you going to do over the next 3 years to prepare for your absence, but no one did that.
Right.
It was just all up to me, and I wasn't thinking that, other than saying to the church, you got to hire someone that's better than me.
Yeah.
And now it's in my mind.
Yeah.
So it's because there's nothing like working your tail off and creating things and building things and looking back and go, where is it?
Where did it go? Yeah, and just to change the metaphor, sometimes we don't always see the fruit of our planting and our labors in this life, and so it can sometimes it was frustrating. Who knows, And one of the things that you might not see is are the folks that are impacted by our conversation today, right?
Yeah.
And in that way, maybe you didn't have that guy who came along in college to help you think through, hey, what's the end and how to work backwards. Maybe something that you said today will really click for somebody who's listening and can help them down the right path. Maybe either seek out and try to find that mentor, try to find that person, or just start to think that way for themselves and say, hey, have that in mind. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I look at things like, in the, ancient, like a cathedral. Think of a community back in the Middle Ages. Hey, let's build this cathedral. I'll be long dead before it's completed, right? I'm going to spend the next 70 years working on this cathedral that won't be done. I'll be dead, and hopefully my grandchildren will be able to worship in it. Yeah. And then no one knows who those workers are. Yeah. But they gave their life. To me, but then those cathedrals are still here.
Yeah.
And they're still, and I think that's another part of trying to think, okay, our school's 25 years old. What we want to do is look at how are we building a school that's going to last for the next 200 years.
Yeah, awesome.
Right? So that's the. And if you have the answer, let me know, because we're still working on that.
Yeah, but the right first step is thinking that way, right?
Absolutely.
Thinking about building something greater than ourselves,
Yes.
greater than just for our lifetime,
Yes.
but for generations that are yet to even be, born, which is awesome.
Yeah. And going back to that idea of trying to be that guy, right? I'm the guy that's got to do it all. I sat with a group of guys in school, kind of wealthy guys they built businesses. One of them was a former division head of Procter & Gamble here in town. We're talking people who've had great responsibility and great, things that they've done. And we sat talking about education, and when I asked them, these three guys, I said, what kind of grades did you get in school? And they all were, they got mostly B's with a few A's in high school, and then mostly just B's in college, right? Just kind of saying. And one of the things that they said that was a benefit to that is they had their share of failures throughout their education. And so here they are in the business world, and their assumption is never that I'm the smartest guy, right? Their assumption is, there's got to be someone better than this than me. Yeah. And we just got to go find them and hire them, or I need to ask them. And so there's this humility about it, right? And no one's going to question that they're the leader, right? At all. It's just that they had this comfort in going like, right. And so one of the things I've been trying to think through that is that, yeah, if the school is going to rest upon Ron Jung's abilities, then it's not going to last that 200 years, right? What I have to do is I have to find those people to bring in that are better than me, right? That are better than me at administration, better than me at, leading this, better than me than, doing development, better than, right? And when you start surrounding yourself with people that are just really good, man, it just makes a world of difference.
And what you can do is leave a layer of bricks in that cathedral, right? You can,
Yeah.
So the next generation doesn't have to start over. You can leave a layer,
Yeah.
so they can build upon, but you can't build the whole thing yourself.
Yeah. And what too is, and I guess, it's the offensive line thing, right? Offensive linemen, we don't really care if anyone notices that I'm playing. What we care about is that we won.
Right.
And what I care about is that guy in front of me didn't get the quarterback,
Right.
And that I don't go offsides or something, Right. But the idea of being a part of the team and doing your best so that we win. And I think though I have a tremendous ego, I hope that it doesn't come out, right? My hope is, I'm more concerned that Providence Academy is successful and that we do a great job. And I don't care if I get the credit or someone else gets the credit. I've talked to, if I'm not the right guy for this, then let's go find the right guy for it. Because what we're doing is more important than me, right? And that's the thing. It's a hard lesson, right?
I think there was a president that said something like, you can really accomplish most anything in life so long as you don't care who gets the credit.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's you can't go it alone. You need to be a part of it, part of the equation. But the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, which is huge. Yeah. It's awesome.
Such a great conversation with Ron here in part 2. Let's recap what he told us not to do. First, don't hold on. Don't hold on. We have to know when to move on in life. And sometimes we can love someone or something so much that we give ourselves to it or to them in a way that ends up yielding diminishing returns all across the board. It's not good for us and it's not good for them. And we need wisdom to know when not, or to when to let go. And so don't hold on. As Ron mentioned here, part of that structure is having accountability, having a close group of friends, mentors, people that aren't yes men, willing to be able to speak hard things into your life, but in a gracious way. So don't hold on. Number 2, don't wait too long. Don't wait too long. I love this quote from Chesterton. If anything is worth doing, it's worth doing poorly, right? And so keep that in mind. Don't wait too long. You were created with incredible potential, and because of that, the world needs, it wants, it yearns for what you have to offer it, your specific gifts, your skills, to be unleashed in service to the world around you. So don't wait too long to do that. Be okay with failing. Don't be afraid of becoming who you are and the massive success that you were created to be in that light, and know that it's a process of maturation. And when you first get started, it's not going to be all that great, right? And that's okay. The point is maturity, right? The point, think about your kiddos and their artwork, right? When they were 2 and 3 years old, like mine are, that work is, it's not a Picasso, let's just say that, right? But by the time that they're, 10 and 12, it starts to get better. And in 17 and 18 and 40 and 50, you can understand the process of maturation and such as life. But if you never got started in the first place, you would never get to that level of mastery, of massive success. And so if it's worth doing, be willing to do it poorly. Last but not least, don't forget the end. Don't forget the end. I love what Ron was just saying about really building something that's greater than yourself, right? So in our day and age, we get stuck in this mindset of like, how can I make, my splash in my lifetime? And Ron talked about it in part 1 about, let's make a loud bang now without any thought to the echoes in eternity, right? And there's a way in which we can do that. And maybe it has to do with this idea of this kind of rugged American individualism, and not to say that there's not a place of perseverance and for grit, but in a way that we kind of isolate and we think that life is just about our little splash in the pond and that's it, right? Rather than seeing us connected to future generations, thinking 4, 5, 7, 8, 10 generations from now, 1,000 generations from now, and how our work in our lifetime is connected to their success or their failure, right? That's really, really powerful. And so connecting our sense of purpose and mission in this life with something far beyond this lifetime, super, super important. And with someone far beyond this lifetime, also super, super important. And like Ron said, when we start to have that vision, we get over ourselves, we get outside of ourselves, and it doesn't have to be about Kyle, it doesn't have to be about Ron. It is about who is best for this particular task, and it's rallying people together around one unified problem, to find that unified solution, to build something greater than themselves for someone greater than themselves, right? And this is one of the glorious purposes of life, is to overflow and to be able to give life to all. And we do it through building with this particular vision in mind. Well, you can see I'm stoked. And I love what I do. I love these conversations, and I love thinking through these conversations afterwards too. I've benefited so much and learned and finding myself growing so much, and I hope you are too. If you are, share this podcast with others, right? Share this episode. And one great way you can do that is by leaving a 5-star review on whatever platform it is that you tune in and listen to What Not to Do. And if you know someone that you would love to hear on What Not to Do, connect us. It's been great to have more and more people connect me with other folks, other entrepreneurs, leaders, and public figures that have had success, but yet have had failures, and willing to lean into those and to even share one of their favorite failures. So exciting. And so if you know someone, connect us. If that's you, let's connect, right? You can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. My handle, I switched it from start with WNTD to Kyle M. Schmitz. And so you can find me on any platform at Kyle M. Schmitz. And so let's connect if we're not already connected. I would love that. Would love to hear from you guys. And I would also love to hear how you guys are liking this new format. So we're almost done with the first week, kind of breaking up these conversations into something that's a little bit more digestible, easy. Would love to hear any feedback that you guys have on that. Has it been great? Has it been not so great? That'd be awesome. Well, speaking of great, it's been said that good men learn from their own mistakes, but great men, they learn from the mistakes of others. So go and be great, and we'll see you next time.